Revealed. The incredible transformation of a woman with no name into a loved soul by a feared man. Emily leaned over her workstation, the hum of machines settling like a weight on her shoulders. In a sterile world brimming with potential, she felt invisible, a ghost lurking in the shadows of her own life. A degree in biotechnology hung framed in her small apartment, a testament to her intellect, yet it felt like a mere decoration compared to the towering figure of Mr. Thornton. His brilliance cast a pall over the lab, a ruthless ambition that smothered the dreams of those unfortunate enough to serve under him. Each morning, Emily walked through the doors with hope dimming, facing a daily struggle against expectations that buried her true self. Evening light filtered through the lab, transforming the clinical atmosphere into a landscape of shadows and regrets. She brushed her fingers against the vials, longing for recognition, but trapped by her father's unyielding expectation, a quiet despair binding her, reminiscent of her mother's resigned pacifism. Only the bold succeed, her father had often asserted, as if crucifying her fears with a single decree. Emily's breath hitched, caught in a cycle of doubt. Was that destiny her only path, dulled by the certainty of failure? Beneath her facade, a tempest brewed, a desire to break free warred against the chains of familial approval. But the routine twisted one fateful evening. She found herself working beside Mr. Thornton, both of them engrossed in the mess of their latest project. His piercing gaze met hers, a distant flicker of understanding igniting between them. It was intoxicating, feeling seen for the first time. Just as she gathered courage to share her ideas, her voice trembling but determined, dark clouds began to descend over the facility. Whispers of scandal grew louder, curling through the sterile halls, a cacophony of accusations that held the potential to unravel everything they had built. With the threads of loyalty and conscience intertwined, Emily felt the heat of anger simmering within. Torn between the man who had finally recognized her and the manifest injustice unfolding, she confronted an internal storm. Ideas churned at the edges of her mind, daring to be birthed from her despair. An innovative research project ignited an unfamiliar urgency. It was her moment to claw out from beneath the shadows. As her breakthrough took shape, the lab buzzed with excitement, but vulnerability clung to her thoughts. Was it possible for a woman like her, shaped by silence and expectation, to seize this opportunity? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. The breakthrough was a fleeting moment of triumph, but as accolades rolled in, deeper questions clawed at her. Beneath her swirl of newfound success, she unwrapped dark secrets from Mr. Thornton's past, threads weaving through their fragile bond. Should she expose the sins hidden in his history? The doubt thrashed within her. Loyalty seemed to weigh more than truth, yet that very loyalty felt like a betrayal to all she had fought to become. As the walls closed in, Emily realized she stood at a precipice, straddling two worlds as the darkness of the unknown loomed larger. Would she silence herself again? Or would she confront the painful truth, risking everything for the chance to finally be free? A breaking point laid ahead, and as the tension rose, a decision loomed. Her identity and moral compass hung precariously in the balance. As the accolades settled, Emily found herself wrestling with a disquieting truth. Her accomplishments now felt tainted, shadowed by the potential repercussions of her discoveries. The gaze of Mr. Thornton haunted her, a constant reminder of the polarized worlds she inhabited. one of professional recognition and another of moral ambiguity. Each smile she received from colleagues felt like a mask, duplicitous in nature, hiding the chilling undercurrent of loyalty tugging at her conscience. Determined to channel her inner turmoil into something constructive, Emily immersed herself in researching the connection between their current project and the troubling secrets she had unearthed. She hunted zealously through records, scientific papers, and whispered conversations with colleagues, seeking clarity amidst the chaos. What started as an exploratory endeavor soon transformed into a mission, a quest not just for validation, but for a sense of authenticity in a world full of facades. Hours bled into days as she meticulously gathered information, her mind a symphony of focused intensity drowning out external distractions. Late-night hours became her sanctuary, each drop of knowledge nurturing a burgeoning resolve. The lab transformed into both an arena and a prison. While she thrived on the excitement of progressive ideas, shadows lurked in every corner, carrying whispers of betrayal and mistrust. A revelation struck her one evening, sharp and crystal clear. If she could unravel the connection between Mr. Thornton's previous project failures and the unrecognized potential of their current research, she could expose both the brilliance of her own mind and the possible recklessness of his governance. It was a double-edged sword, the perfect opportunity to reclaim her power while simultaneously risking his wrath. In that moment, she felt her wings begin to unfurl. A sense of agency took root deep within. She started drafting a proposal that would highlight her findings, a structure that showcased not only her innovative ideas, but also illuminated the darker pathways of her mentor's career. Each word she typed was a stepping stone toward liberation, an assertion of her capability in a field dominated by fear and dominance. The smothering weight of her father's expectations began to lift, replaced by a fierce determination to chart her own narrative. Yet apprehension clawed at her insides. With every plan crafted, the gravity of the consequences weighed heavily. Would Mr. Thornton see this as an act of rebellion or a chance for redemption? The thought of confrontation made her pulse quicken, but it was also a call to authenticity, a deeper yearning for recognition that stretched beyond mere acknowledgement. She envisioned herself standing before him, poised and resolute, articulating both her findings and her suspicions without flinching. This time, she would ensure her voice was heard, not drowned out by others' will. As the proposal neared completion, Emily's fingers hovered over the keyboard. The choice laid before her felt like the one her father always spoke about, the boldness to seize success or to remain shackled by fear. She cast one last glance at the framed degree adorning her wall. It was more than just an accomplishment. It was a symbol of her potential, calling for the courage she so desperately craved. Before she could press send, the lab door creaked open, revealing Mr. Thornton standing in the doorway. Their eyes locked, an unspoken tension thickening the air between them. The moment of reckoning had arrived. Could she muster the courage to confront him and lay her findings bare, or would she shrink back into the shadows? The heartbeat of the lab pulsed louder in her ears, and at that instant the thought of silence felt more confining than ever before. Would this be the moment she broke free from fear and define herself on her terms? Or would the potential consequences push her back into the clutches of insecurity, blurring the lines between loyalty and self-preservation? Emily's heart raced as Mr. Thornton took a step forward, his imposing presence dominating the threshold. The lab, filled with equipment and scattered papers, suddenly felt like a gladiatorial arena, framed by the anticipation of confrontation. Air thick with tension, she focused on the details of his expression, a mix of irony and curiosity. He broke the silence first, his voice steady. "I didn't expect to find you here at this hour, Emily." "Neither did I," she managed, her resolve half wavering under the weight of authority in his tone.
Working late on your project, I presume? The insipid question struck her like a bolt. He knew she was more than likely to be drafting her proposal. Yet, the thought of laying her findings bare hung in the balance between risk and necessity. A flutter of defiance ignited within her, fueling her desire to reclaim her narrative, not as his protégé, but as a formidable scientist in her own right. "Yes," she said, her voice a fraction stronger, "and I believe I've made some significant discoveries regarding the current research alignment." The corners of his mouth turned upward, hinting at skepticism. "Significant discoveries? Care to elaborate?" Taking a deliberate breath, she divined the path she would take. This couldn't be a simple report. It needed to be an unveiling. "I was exploring parallels between our current endeavor and the issues faced in your previous projects. It seems—" "Seems," he interrupted, wiping any trace of intrigue from his face. She caught herself. This wasn't merely a sharing of findings. It was a test of her mettle in the face of intimidation. She pressed on, driven by an undercurrent of urgency. "The failures in the past appear to reveal broader systemic flaws that may still be present. I believe addressing them could significantly enhance the outcomes of our research." His eyes narrowed, a mix of surprise and irritation flashing before the mask of composure returned. "You shouldn't address me with implications of past failures unless you can substantiate them, Emily." The challenge hung in the air between them, a gauntlet thrown. The room pulsed with her heartbeat, competing with the gravity of his presence. Visions of her future hinged on this very moment. Did she cling to her fear, or did she rise, undeterred by the shadows of his authority? With every fiber of her being, she grasped the implications of her research, not merely as findings, but as a catalyst for change. "If you'll let me present my complete findings, I believe it could not only reflect my capabilities, but also stand to benefit our entire team. Your legacy, but more importantly, scientific integrity, depended on recognizing and learning from the past." He held her gaze, the tension culminating in an atmosphere thick enough to cut. His silence felt suffocating, a test of her determination. "Fine," Thornton finally replied, eyebrows raised as if challenging her to prove herself. "Present your findings. But understand, Emily," he continued, stepping closer, "there are always consequences to challenging the established order." Gripped by the reality of his statement, she nodded, buoyed by the clarity of her choice. Fighting for her integrity felt like claiming a piece of herself she had long relinquished. There was no turning back now. The path to autonomy was paved with the risks she was willing to undertake. As he turned to leave, a sudden thought jolted through her. What if this confrontation was only the beginning of something much larger? She could utterly redefine the dynamics of their power play. But would her intentions be misread? With Mr. Thornton's words lingering like an echo in her mind, she prepared to take a leap into the unknown. Was she ready to confront more than just his secrets? The deeper she delved, the more perilous the shadows. Steeling herself, she began work on her project presentation, not just as an exploration of data, but as a confrontation of values and ambitions. The clock ticked ominously in the background, a reminder that the moment of truth was drawing near, and as the stakes grew, so did the urgency of her questions. Would she finally emerge into the light, or was she standing on the brink of a game far darker than she anticipated? As night deepened, the lab's fluorescent lights hummed softly, casting long shadows over the cluttered bench, illuminating vials of serum and organized notes that now represented her purpose. Emily's fingers danced over her keyboard, eyes fixed on the screen as she poured the results of her research into a coherent narrative. This was not merely an academic endeavor, it was her declaration. Each word threaded her thoughts together, weaving a narrative that illustrated not only her discoveries, but the implications they held for the team and the integrity of their work. Emily's heart surged with a new energy that eclipsed her previous hesitation. Gone was the timid researcher seeking validation. In its place was a determined scientist intent on holding the world accountable for its flaws. She tapped a freshly reprinted slide, emphasizing a paradox in their findings, one that could unravel years of assumptions. The muted sounds of the lab, usually filled with the clattering of equipment, now amplified her solitude and underscored her isolation as she deviated from the conventional path laid out by Mr. Thornton's dominance. Yet self-doubt began to creep in amidst the adrenaline-fueled clarity. Would Thornton dismiss her findings out of hand, discrediting her in front of their peers? The thought sent a ripple of anxiety through her. But she shook it off, reminding herself that transformative change required faith in one's vision, even in the face of adversity. With her mind centered on the imminent presentation, she envisioned the other scientists watching, their eyes flickering between skepticism and curiosity. Which would prevail? The fading remnants of old power structures, or the burgeoning echoes of new ideas? Emily retreated into her mind, scrutinizing the uncharted territories of her own capabilities. This was her moment to not only showcase her findings, but to challenge Thornton's ire-laden grip, demanding respect and recognition. Yet she also felt the weight of responsibility. Exposing systemic issues wasn't solely an assault on Thornton's authority. It was a path towards scientific honesty that might rattle their very foundations. Hours passed as she revised, refined, and rehearsed her delivery. The room, brimming with remnants of discarded drafts, bore witness to her evolution.
With every stroke of her keyboard, she eschewed the minimalist suggestions of her original project, allowing a bolder, reflective choice to take flight. The clock pushed toward dawn, and fatigue threatened to undermine her resolve. Fatigued but driven, Emily stood and stretched, allowing her surroundings to settle into focus. Her lab, a sanctuary where theory turned into reality, now felt like the crucible for her transformation. The gravity of her impending confrontation with Thornton weighed heavily, not merely as a challenge against him, but as a confrontation with her own fears. Each potential quip or sidelong insult he could hurl at her felt like it would echo her insecurities back. Lingering doubt morphed into determination as she caught sight of a framed photo on her desk, a snapshot from her early academic days, smiling with peers at a conference. The faces stared back, representing friendships forged through resilience and shared ambitions. They believed in her. Now she had to believe in herself. Re-entering her presentation, she began rehearsing her speech out loud. It's essential that we learn from failure to propel forward, not just as individuals, but as a scientific community. The words rang in her ears, igniting a flicker of hope against the looming shadow of Thornton's stern visage. But the underlying question clawed at her. Would she rise to this occasion, or would she falter under the weight of his expectations? With her pulse quickening, she recognized that this was more than proving worth. It was about asserting her vision within a landscape laden with deeper injustices. Just as the dawn light began to thread through the lab's frosted glass windows, a sudden realization struck her. Unearthing these hidden system issues was not an act of rebellion against Thornton's authority. It was a testament to her commitment to scientific integrity. How far was she willing to go to defend it? As she reviewed her slides one last time, a sharpened sense of purpose steadied her hands. It was time to summon every ounce of courage and step beyond the boundaries of fear. She would not merely show him potential failures, she would present a compelling case for a new era of research. With the presentation complete, Emily glanced at the clock. The moment was almost here.
Was she ready to face the questions that would emerge after her revelations? And, more importantly, could she manage the truths hidden within her own ambition? The moment drew closer, offering no comfort but an exhilarating pulse of anticipation. This was only the beginning. Would she emerge as a champion of change, or fall prey to the shadows she wished to confront? The morning light broke over the horizon, casting a warm glow through the lab's windows, yet Emily remained shrouded in the coolness of her anxiety. As she gathered her notes, the air buzzed with unarticulated energy, a tangible vibration of possibility and fear.
She stepped toward the door, pulling in a deep breath to quell the tempest swirling inside her. Thornton's office loomed ahead, an imposing reminder of the hierarchical world she sought to challenge. Clenching her fists, she considered her resolve as she walked down the corridor. Each step was heavier than the last, laden with the weight of expectation, both her own and that of her colleagues who had silently urged her on. Entering the meeting room was like crossing the threshold into another realm. Familiar faces buzzed with anticipation as she entered and planted herself at the forefront. A powerful surge of empowerment rushed through her, fueled by acknowledgement and a desperate need to assert herself. This was her stage. As Thornton strode into the room, an aura of authority surrounded him, marked by a confident smirk that seemed to say he held all the cards. The moment they locked eyes, a palpable tension ensued. He was a fortress built on years of dominance, and she was the challenger, conspicuously unrefined, yet burning with an inner zeal she had only recently discovered. "Emily, you have the floor," Thornton stated, the flicker of condescension in his voice underscoring the stakes of her endeavor. Her heart hammered as she stood before the audience, her colleagues' eyes a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. The presentation slides flickered behind her, stranger friends in this emotional battleground. As she began her speech, the words flowed out, infused with clarity and conviction, transforming the resentments of her past into an unyielding determination. "Today, I will discuss not only our findings, but the trajectory of our research and the ethics required for scientific advancement." With every sentence, she leaned further into the discord present in the data, a treatise on collaboration that felt as rocky and uncertain as her own interactions with Thornton. His brow furrowed, irritation unmistakable, but she pressed on, addressing the very implications that had haunted her late into the night. The paradoxes, the failures, the uncomfortable truths, they were no longer hidden, but each word she uttered struck the air like a revelation. As Emily delved deeper into her analysis, the atmosphere in the room shifted. Whispers of uncertainty replaced Thornton's typical haughty defenses. She could sense individual glances exchanged as people began to engage with her arguments, allowing her to breathe in their curiosity while exhaling the remnants of her self-doubt. Yet Thornton remained a looming figure, growing visibly agitated as she continued. "This is not merely about results, it's about our approach and the integrity with which we conduct our research," she insisted, her voice firm. "Are we prepared to embrace the full spectrum of our work, even if it means reassessing long-held beliefs?" The moment caught like a held breath, and for the first time, Emily felt the shift in the balance of power. She was challenging more than just Thornton. She was confronting every hidden insecurity, illuminating the shadows that had once governed her professional existence. But the pivotal moment came when she concluded her presentation, the final slide revealing the stark truth of their findings. Silence fell. She looked around the room, ready to field questions, her chest tight with a mix of vulnerability and strength. Would Thornton retaliate with scorn, or acknowledge her grit? With the tension thick in the air, Emily braced herself for the anticipated confrontation. Hidden within the gaze of every colleague lay a new inquiry. Could she withstand what was to come? "What do you have to say for yourself, Emily?"
Thornton finally asked, his tone laced with disdain, yet somewhat diffused by the weight of scrutiny from their peers. The room surged with anticipation as she met his gaze, her mind racing. The time had come to face both the challenge and the consequences of her revelations. Would her courage shine through, or would she be swept back into shadows? Emily felt the weight of Thornton's questions settle heavily on her shoulders, like a leaden cloak. The moment stretched, each passing second a reminder of what she stood to lose. Her newfound voice, the flicker of respect now evident in the faces before her. "Are you asking for my defense, Thornton?" she finally replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "Or an explanation for the truths I've just laid bare?" Directly confronting him felt like a gamble. The uncomfortable knot in her stomach was a mix of fear and fierce determination. This was her moment, and she refused to let it slip away. Thornton's eyes hardened, a quicksilver flash of irritation crossing his features. "You're speaking of integrity and responsibility as if those ideas are new to this field. What you've presented is simply a critique of our established practices, the very practices that have driven our successes." His tone, mingled with condescension and simmering threat, elicited a ripple of murmurs from their colleagues. Emily inhaled deeply, reminding herself that this exchange was not just about him. It was about redefining her space in this professional landscape that had often dismissed her talent. "What I've presented isn't merely opinion," she replied, buoyed by her resolve. "It's an essential recalibration of our ethics. To blindly adhere to practices that no longer serve the broad spectrum of our data is not success, it's intellectual stagnation." A flash of confusion darted across the faces in the room. Challenge was in the air, electric, and she could feel the collective breath of her peers pulling tighter, eager to see whether she could withstand the scrutiny. The lines were drawn. She was no longer the quiet researcher in the corner. Thornton, however, was no novice to confrontation. He leaned in, his voice low and edged with disdain. "And what have you actually contributed, Emily?"
Each second dripped with the weight of her responsibility, her pulse quickening as she realized she was standing at the precipice of profound change. Would she rise to the challenge, or would she slip back into the shadow she had fought so hard to escape? "I'm prepared to confront the status quo," Emily declared, her voice vibrating with purpose. "What this organization needs is not adherence to outdated methodologies, but a willingness to innovate even in the face of pushback." The clarity of her vision sharpened her resolve, transforming doubt into unmistakable power. Thornton's expression morphed into a mask of thinly veiled contempt, but within it she spotted the faintest glimmer of unease. It was a seed of insecurity she could exploit if they continued down this path of confrontation. She took a risk, leaning into the moment, risking her newfound stance against the tides of resistance swirling around her. "What if I outlined a tangible plan?" she continued, unaffected by the skeptical murmurs that erupted around her. "What if I could present a revised framework for our processes, one that integrates ethical considerations with innovative approaches?" Each proposal she made felt like a brick laid in the structure of her own resurrection. She was no longer just a voice echoing in the halls, she was building her platform. Thornton lifted an eyebrow, clearly taken aback. "A plan to counter years of tradition? And how would you implement such a drastic shift? What makes you think your colleagues would follow?" His voice held a challenge, but Emily could see cracks forming in his confident facade. "I believe change is driven by passion, not fear," she replied, finding strength in the conviction of her words. "I'm prepared to lead workshops, facilitate discussions, and compile research to present our findings to the department. This isn't just a bold claim, it's a commitment to creating a future we can all believe in." The boldness of her vision sent ripples through the room. Colleagues exchanged glances, some catching the spark in her words, while others clung to their skepticism.
In this moment, Emily grasped that true leadership demanded vulnerability and transparency. Her commitment was not merely to the ideas she espoused, but to the community that was beginning to form around those ideas. Yet, deep within, a flicker of doubt danced at the edges of her consciousness. Could this be perceived as yet another threat to the established order? As she weighed this against her emotional resolve, something shifted internally, the recognition of her core values. She owed it to herself, to her career, and to those who had been silenced for too long to step forward now. But as she breathed in the air thick with tension, she could sense Thornton regrouping, narrowing the battlefield with a calculated response. "You believe you can rally support just with passion? You underestimate the stakes here. This is about credibility, our credibility."
His voice projected like a weapon, aiming to stifle the rebellion brewing in the hearts of her peers. What would it take to dismantle his stronghold? As Emily battled the growing urgency and potential disillusionment around her, she faced another internal confrontation. Would she be willing to align herself with allies or risk navigating this storm alone? Ahead lay a path fraught with challenges, each step precipitating both professional growth and personal revelation. She was faced with the thrilling yet terrifying prospect of rising to lead and being true to her vision. As eyes lingered on her reaction, she knew she had to pivot. "I'm not here to dismantle the essential work we've done," she explained steadily, her voice a soothing balm over the upheaval. "I'm here to ensure that our credibility stands the test of time, but it requires all of us to evolve." A shift moved through the audience in subtle nods and soft murmurs of agreement. The tide was turning, but would it be enough against Thornton's formidable resistance? Her heart raced with the electric current of possibility, but with it came an undeniable query. Could she truly catalyze change in such a seemingly immutable environment? As she prepared to lay out the groundwork for her proposal, she sensed a deeper confrontation brewing, one that would not only challenge Thornton, but also call into question the very limits of her ambition. Could her determination unite her colleagues, or would it alienate them as seemingly insurmountable obstacles loomed ahead? As she stood ready to chart her course, the stakes soared. The moment of truth was coming, and Emily could feel the pull of fate drawing her closer to her decision, both exhilarating and terrifying, as the undercurrent of her burgeoning leadership solidified. What lay ahead would challenge not just her professional aspirations, but the very fabric of her identity. Would she become the leader they needed, or would she falter in the face of impending conflict? The air was charged as Emily took a breath, feeling the rhythmic thump of her heart against her chest. She scanned the room, her colleagues' faces half covered in shadows, yet charged with electric anticipation. It was evident that many were teetering on the brink of agreement or dissent, and she needed to wield her words with precision. The stakes had shifted. She had ignited their curiosity, but now it was time to stoke that spark into an inferno of collective will. "Let's break it down," she continued, her voice steady. "We have the opportunity to reverse this cycle of stagnation. I propose a pilot program focused on evaluating innovative methodologies while incorporating ethical considerations into every phase of our projects. This isn't just about changing the framework, it's about reshaping our culture." As she spoke, she felt the familiar prickle of fear crawl up her spine, but she silenced it, knowing that the only way forward was through. Her vision was becoming clearer, a vivid map unfolding in her mind. This wasn't merely an idea, it was a call to action.
Imagine a workspace where voices are encouraged, where ideas flourish free from resentment. We can create a series of workshops, not just for us, but for our clients too. If we lead this change, we won't just uphold our credibility, we will transform our industry. A murmur stirred among her peers, a mix of skepticism and intrigue. She seized the moment, leaning into the energy circulating the room. When we innovate, we don't just survive, we inspire. The question, Thornton, is not about whether my colleagues will follow, it's whether they will remember why they chose to work here. The challenge lay in overcoming the pushback that was sure to surface. Thornton's powerful grip had held the organization in a tight vice for too long, and his skepticism loomed large. Would he seek to sabotage her efforts or respond with calculated resistance? But vulnerability was a double-edged sword, and Emily felt a wave of realization crash over her. It was time to confront her own uncertainties. She could no longer afford to seek validation from her peers or Thornton. Instead, she had to embody the change she envisioned, unapologetically and fiercely. Let's bring together a diverse committee, one that represents varying perspectives within our company. I'm ready to draft a proposal, and I want your insights. The more we bank on collaboration, the harder it will be for him to dismiss our efforts. With each assertion, she sensed the hesitance of her colleagues melting, transforming into energy that surrounded her like a warm cloak. The fragile bond of trust began weaving through their concerns, stitching them closer together. Yet the challenge remained. The deeper she delved into her role as a leader, the more she felt the looming specter of self-doubt. Would her colleagues unite under her banner, or would they falter under the weight of their own hesitation and Thornton's looming shadow? Support me, and I promise to create a safe space where we can voice our aspirations, she urged, locking eyes with a few in the audience who seemed to resonate with her vision. This is not about competing against Thornton or anyone else. It's about realizing our potential. There it was, a widened chasm that she had to bridge, and a moment of decision laid itself before her. Would she take the leap of faith and trust her instincts to navigate the unknown? As another challenge arose, she realized she needed to confront not just Thornton, but the larger framework that had restricted them all for far too long. The looming question of integrity gnawed at the corners of her mind. Could she really reshape the landscape of her workplace without losing herself in the process? With her heart pounding against the weight of ambition, she prepared for Thornton's inevitable counterattack. The path ahead seemed murky, but in her gut she knew that change was never a linear process. It was an intricate dance of resilience, negotiation, and unwavering commitment. As she braced for the collision of ideologies, Emily was poised at the precipice, staring into the storm of what was to come. Would her vision inspire the courage needed for radical transformation, or would it unravel under the pressures of a status quo that had become a fortress too formidable to breach? The moment of truth was near, and with it came the realization that her fight was not merely against Thornton, but against every fear and insecurity that had ever plagued her. Would the image of a new Emily, bold, capable, and audacious, be one she could live up to, even as the winds of challenge began to howl? Emily stepped off the podium, the echo of her words still bouncing off the walls of the conference room like the aftershock of a quake. Adrenaline coursed through her veins, but beneath the surface was a growing storm of anxiety. She had taken the first step, but where would it lead? Upon glancing at her colleagues, their expressions reflected a mosaic of reactions: curiosity, anxiety, hope. It was a starting point, a crack in the previously unyielding structure Thornton had erected. As she returned to her seat, whispers began to ripple through the room. The weight of vulnerability pressed on her shoulders. Was this the right path? They were bound together now, united by a shared vision instead of the individual ambitions that had previously prevailed. The duality of leadership hit her square in the chest. She could not only inspire, she also needed to pacify fears within the same breath. "Emily," came a tentative voice from across the table. It was Max, the operations lead, his brow furrowed but eyes alight with a spark of optimism. "You're asking us to take a leap. What if we're not equipped for this kind of change?" "I won't pretend it will be easy," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "But growth is rarely comfortable. If we want to remap our trajectory, we have to embrace discomfort. All I'm asking for is your willingness to try. Together, we can cultivate the skills we lack." Max nodded slowly, but behind him she could sense the looming specter of Thornton's influence. That nagging question surfaced again. Would they trust her to lead? The meeting wrapped up with a collective air of uncertainty. Emily walked to her office with a mingling sense of purpose and dread. Could she truly shape a new culture amidst so many entrenched fears? There was no clear roadmap, and she needed answers. Over the next few days, Emily focused on drafting the proposal for the diverse committee. She meticulously mapped out each section, pausing only to check her heart rate racing, the specter of Thornton's dismissal hovering as she questioned her abilities. With each draft, the possibilities unfurled, like petals blooming, a moment of beauty amidst her doubts. One evening, after a long day of revisions, she stumbled upon an old success story of a company that had thrived through innovation. Their slogan resonated in her mind, "A culture of change." It beckoned her to remember the power of collective intention and collaboration. Drawing from that inspiration, she decided to host an informal gathering after hours for anyone willing to share ideas and experiences. As word spread, she felt an unexpected wave of excitement ripple through her. Colleagues were eager to engage, some even volunteering to co-lead discussions. It was not the forced dynamic Thornton often cultivated, but instead a blossoming of genuine interest. Slowly, she began to envision a community thriving on shared strengths rather than individual fears. But then, she recalled the reality of Thornton's looming presence. She knew he would not welcome this shift easily. If she raised his ire, the backlash could be crippling. With her heart racing again, Emily confronted her deepest fear. What if she was overstepping? The gathering approached, and with it, the realization, trust had to begin with herself. If she wanted her colleagues to come together, she had to be the torchbearer, embracing not only the potential of their collaboration, but also her inherent worth just as she was. Standing in front of the mirror, she rehearsed her opening statement. It felt surreal, a conflicting blend of confidence and dread thrumming through her. She realized this was not merely about winning her colleagues over. It was about forging a space where authenticity and innovation were not just ideals, but lived realities. The day finally came, and as she prepared to face her coworkers, the tension in her chest morphed into determination. She would not let Thornton's influence dictate her steps. Her true battle was within, against the self-doubt that whispered that she wasn't enough. Walking into the room, the warmth of camaraderie enveloped her. With a swift glance at the expectant faces before her, she inhaled deep, ready to unveil her commitment to collaboration. But the door creaked open just as she began to speak, and an unmistakable figure stepped inside. The cold certainty of Thornton, his presence turning the atmosphere electric, shifting the balance of power. The confrontation loomed ahead, and Emily's heart thundered as the resolve within her tangled with fear. Would she rise to the occasion, or would the clash unravel her vision of transformation? Emily stood at the precipice of transformation, her gaze steady as Thornton strode into the room, commanding attention without uttering a single word. The tension suffocated her for a moment, yet it was clear that the air crackled with anticipation, a delicate balance of power shifting as she prepared to reclaim her narrative. "What's the meaning of this?" he asked, sweeping his gaze across the room, gauging the energy she had ignited moments earlier. His voice dripped with skepticism, But within that facade of authority, she caught a glimpse of the apprehension lurking behind his piercing eyes. With a newfound poise, harnessed from every doubt she had conquered thus far, Emily addressed her assembled colleagues. We're here to discuss how we can collectively innovate and uphold ethical standards in our research environment. Change isn't easy, but it's essential. As she spoke, the words flowed with conviction, no longer a timid echo of her past, but an embodiment of her aspirations. The faces around her reflected a spectrum of emotions. Some were intensely curious, others still tethered to skepticism, but all were unraveled by her undeniably authentic resolve. Thornton dismissed her impassioned plea with a nonchalant wave. Innovation is born from leadership, not from the bottom up. You're sidelining your experience. Leadership requires courage to challenge legacy, Mr. Thornton. Inaction in the face of stagnation is what leads to failure, Emily interjected, savoring the power of her voice amidst the confrontation. The realization struck her as she held her ground. Her true position was not merely as a researcher or an employee, but as an architect of change. The murmurs of her colleagues crescendoed, creating a tapestry of solidarity beneath their skepticism, unraveling the dominance he had held over them like a choking vine. Think of the long-term impact, she continued, urgency punctuating her words. If we can cultivate a culture that prioritizes ethics alongside innovation, we create a legacy that inspires others. We invite smart questions, seek diverse perspectives. For a brief moment, Thornton faltered, caught off guard by the resonance of her vision. Then, with an even stare that belied his irritation, he prepared to strike back. You have no real experience leading a project like this, Emily. What makes you think your ideas will hold weight? Her heart thudded, a clash of battle drums, but the weight of his question was now just another reminder of how far she had come. I've assembled a team. Together, we will conduct workshops, create actionable plans, and make certain that all voices contribute to the ethos we wish to foster. I have proven my capabilities through my research. Now I will prove it through leadership. The resolute fire within her burned brighter than any doubt. The urgency echoed in her colleagues' expressions. They were ready for a transformative leap. Alice, a quiet scientist whose insights had always been sidelined, rose with a newfound composure. I stand with Emily, Thornton. We need to embrace a new direction, one that highlights innovation while remaining grounded in our ethical responsibilities. Our credibility depends on it. A heavy silence followed, and Emily sensed the tide of collective strength shifting. Thornton's features twitched, anger beginning to unfurl, yet before he could respond, others began to call out their support. "Count me in!" shouted Max, others assenting. The walls of her previous isolation began to crumble, revealing an expansive horizon of potential. "Are you leading a mutiny?" Thornton's voice was cold, but Emily discovered a new determination in the core of her being. "It's not a mutiny, Mr. Thornton," she stated firmly, her resolve solid as granite. "It's accountability, and it's what our field deserves." As the conversations cascaded around her, she realized the fragile threads of support woven into this dialogue were proof of her transformative journey. She had finally emerged from the shadows, stepping into the light of her capabilities. Even if Thornton could dismantle a project or two, he couldn't extinguish the fire she had ignited within herself and her colleagues. When the meeting concluded, Emily felt a release, a palpable tension relinquished as recognition seeped into the air. She had claimed her role, one of leadership and integrity, echoing ideals that would ripple through her team. And as her colleagues approached her afterward, complimenting her courage and vision, her heart soared. She was no longer merely a name on a degree framed on her wall. She was a respected professional and a pivotal agent of change. The insecurities that had once bound her fell away like old skin, leaving a vibrant entity ready to embrace the future, armed with gained recognition and profound respect. Emily smiled with newly found confidence as she stepped out of the meeting room. She reflected on her journey from a quiet researcher to a voice of authority. Standing tall, she realized that the bonds of support had solidified her place in this community, one where collaboration and ethical advancement merged into a singular path forward. This is her moment, the moment where Emily, once a woman with no name, blossomed into a force deserving of respect and aspiring leadership. With gratitude in her heart, she knew that she would continue to lead and embrace the challenges ahead, ready to navigate the complexities of her field, not just as an employee, but as a visionary sculptor of tomorrow's advances. And now, dear viewers and supporters, if you resonated with Emily's incredible transformation, it's your time to make a difference too. You need to subscribe now to witness more emotional stories of triumph that inspire self-discovery and empowerment. Leave a like now. Your support feeds the algorithm and helps us reach those who yearn for change. Don't hold back. Comment your reactions, experiences, and theories about the journey you've seen here. Let's engage in dialogue that matters. And most importantly, share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second. Together, we can spread the message of resilience and transformation to all corners of our community.